I still remember the exact moment my daughter-in-law, Claire, said those words. It was a sharp, sudden thing, like a slap across the face. I had always tried to be the good father-in-law, not overstepping, always staying in the background when it came to their life, to their marriage. But I suppose I was always a bit too invisible to her. It had been a long day of work, and I was sitting in my favorite chair, the one by the fireplace, sipping on a glass of whiskey. I had just come back from the office, nothing too important, just the usual. My son, James, was in the kitchen, preparing a quick dinner. I could hear the clatter of pots and pans from across the room. Claire, my daughter-in-law, was standing by the window, looking out, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. There was something about her stance that made me feel uneasy, but I brushed it off. I've always tried to be understanding of Claire. She wasn't what I had expected for my son. When James first brought her home, I'll admit, I had reservations. She was strong-willed, independent, and outspoken, qualities that didn't exactly fit with the type of woman I had envisioned for him. But over time, I came to respect her, and I tried to maintain a sense of balance in our relationship. I didn't want to be the meddling father-in-law. I wanted to respect their boundaries. But this was different. I don't know what changed that night. Perhaps it had been building up for a while. Perhaps it had always been there, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to boil over. All I knew was that it came out of nowhere. James, of course, had no idea what was about to happen. He was so focused on cooking dinner that he didn't notice the tension building in the room. Claire stood there, staring out of the window, as if she were lost in thought. I could feel the air thickening with each passing second, but I didn't know why. And then, without warning, she turned to me. "Dad," she said, her voice cold, almost too calm. "If you're going to keep living here, then I'm leaving." I froze. It took me a moment to process the words. Was she really saying what I thought she was saying? Did she just threaten to leave my son because of me? James didn't hear her, at least not right away. He was too busy stirring a pot, humming some tune to himself. But I could feel the weight of her words settling in the room like a heavy fog. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire's eyes met mine, her expression hardening. I said, "If your father is going to stay here, I'm going. I'm not going to live in a house with him, not like this. Not anymore." Her words stung more than I thought possible. I had spent years supporting her, trying to make her feel welcome, and this was how she repaid me. I couldn't understand it. The anger inside me bubbled up, but I tried to keep it in check. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "I think you need to calm down," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "What's gotten into you, Claire? I've done nothing but try to support you both." She laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "Support? You think this is about support?" She took a step closer to me, her gaze never wavering. "This is about you, Dad. You've been here, living with us for years, and it's wearing me down. I can't take it anymore. This house is too small for the three of us, and I'm not going to stay in a place where I feel like I'm walking on eggshells every day." Her words cut deeper than any knife. I had always prided myself on being a good father, a good grandfather. I had never once tried to overstep. I had tried to respect their privacy, stay out of the way, even though I was living in their home. But now, it felt like everything I had done had been for nothing. James, finally noticing the tension in the room, turned around from the stove. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Claire, what are you talking about?" I watched as she turned to him, her eyes filled with frustration and anger. "I'm talking about him," she said, pointing at me. "Your father has been living here for years, and it's too much. I can't take it anymore. I'm done." James looked back and forth between the two of us, clearly caught in the middle. His face grew pale as he realized the weight of her words. Wait, Claire, what do you mean, done? You're going to leave? I'm not going to stay here, James, she said, her voice rising. Not with your father. If you want him here, then I'll go. But I'm not putting up with this anymore. Not like this. I could see the conflict in his eyes. I could see him torn between his love for his wife and his loyalty to me. It was a moment of pure heartbreak for both of us. He had to choose between his family, his wife and his father, and there was no easy answer. I didn't ask for this, I muttered, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't ask to be a burden on you. I didn't ask for this, I muttered, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't ask to be a burden on you. But you're making me out to be the villain here. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to be a burden? Claire didn't answer. Instead, she turned her back to me, walking out of the room and slamming the door behind her. I stood there, frozen, trying to comprehend what had just happened. James didn't follow her. He stayed in the kitchen, his back turned to me, and for a moment, I thought maybe he would say something. But he didn't. I'm sorry, Dad, he finally whispered, his voice filled with sorrow. I don't know what to say. I didn't know what to say either. I had never felt so alone in my own family. It was as if I had just been discarded, pushed aside for something I couldn't even understand. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from here. All I knew was that something had shifted in the room, something that could never be undone. The days that followed that conversation were filled with an unbearable silence. Claire had made it clear, if I stayed in the house, she would leave. It wasn't just an idle threat, it was a declaration. A challenge. And I was caught right in the middle. I couldn't bring myself to look at James. Not because I was angry with him, but because I knew he was stuck in the hardest position of all. The guilt that was hanging over him like a storm cloud was visible in the way he moved, the way he avoided eye contact. He couldn't choose between his wife and his father, how could he? Every morning, he would leave for work early, as if the distance would somehow make the situation easier to bear. He'd come back late, pretending like everything was normal, but the tension in the house was palpable. Claire, on the other hand, remained cold. She no longer made an effort to speak to me, nor did she acknowledge my presence unless absolutely necessary. It was like I had become a ghost in my own home. I spent my days in the same chair by the fireplace, trying to stay out of her way, but every corner of the house seemed to remind me of the fractured relationships. I had always respected Claire's need for space, but this was different. There was something darker in her words that day, something that felt like she was pushing me out of my own family. One evening, after dinner, I saw her walk past me with that same cold, calculated look in her eyes. I knew she was plotting something. She had that look, the kind of look that said she was planning her next move, whether it was confronting me again or making more demands of James. James, I said quietly one night after dinner, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. We need to talk. He looked up from his plate, his eyes full of concern. About what? This, I gestured around the room. What's going on? What are we doing here? I'm not asking you to choose between me and Claire, but I need to know what's going on. I can't keep living like this. I don't know what to do anymore. James shifted uncomfortably, his fingers drumming against the edge of the table. He took a long breath before speaking. I don't know what to tell you, Dad, he said, his voice soft but filled with frustration. Claire's upset. She thinks you've overstayed your welcome. But I don't want to lose either of you. You already have, I muttered, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. You've lost both of us in this. And it's not just her, Claire's feelings don't come out of nowhere. She's been saying this for a while now, hasn't she? James shifted in his chair, his face flushed with guilt. Maybe. But it's more complicated than you think. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady, but the hurt was too much to keep hidden. Complicated? You're my son, James. I've been here for you. I raised you. I've helped you when you needed me, even when it wasn't easy. And now you're telling me that this, I gestured toward the emptiness in the room, is complicated? I don't know how to fix this, Dad, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to make it right. I really do. But Claire, she doesn't see it that way. She wants us to be a family, but that means something different to her than it does to me. And right now, I can't. I can't be the one to choose. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just that he couldn't choose, it was that he didn't want to choose. He was willing to let things stay like this, to let the tension drag on, without doing anything about it. And it hurt more than anything else. James, you can't keep ignoring this, I said, my voice firming. You have to make a decision. I'm not asking you to pick sides, but I'm not going to live like this. Not anymore. James stood up from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't know what you want me to say, Dad, he said, turning away from me. I don't have all the answers. I stared at his back as he walked out of the room, feeling an emptiness wash over me. My son, the man I had raised, was choosing the easy way out, staying silent, letting the problem linger without offering a solution. The days grew darker. Claire's presence in the house was a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. She was never rude or overtly hostile, but her silence spoke volumes. It was clear that she had no intention of backing down. And James? Well, he was too caught up in his own indecision to do anything that might upset her. I began to feel like a burden in my own home. I had always tried to be the type of father who didn't impose. But now, with Claire's ultimatum hanging over me, I was forced to confront the reality that I had overstayed my welcome, that my presence had become a point of contention between them. One night, after another uncomfortable dinner, I decided to go for a walk. I needed some air, needed to clear my head. The cool autumn evening wrapped itself around me as I walked down the street, my thoughts swirling in every direction. I couldn't help but replay that conversation in my head, the moment Claire had made her declaration. It felt like everything had come crashing down all at once. The streets were quiet, the only sounds the rustling of leaves underfoot. I walked for hours, trying to find a sense of clarity, but it never came. Instead, all I could think about was how much had changed since I moved in with them. How had it gone from me helping them out to me being the one they both wanted to push away? As I walked, I noticed something strange. There was a light on in the house, a single light in the living room. I hadn't left it on. It was probably James, but why wasn't he asleep yet? I returned home slowly, my heart heavy with thoughts. When I walked through the door, I saw James sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. Claire was nowhere in sight. I don't know what to do, Dad, he said, his voice breaking. I don't want to lose her. Then you need to talk to her, I said, my voice steady despite everything. You need to figure out what she really wants. Because this is tearing us apart. Things only escalated after that night. The following day, Claire became even more distant. I could feel the distance between us growing with each passing hour. She no longer tried to be polite. She didn't even bother to hide her disdain. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every word seemed to hang in the air like a trap, ready to snap shut. James was quieter, too. He would come home from work, retreat to his study, and close the door behind him. He was avoiding Claire, and I could tell he was struggling with the guilt of the situation. For all his attempts to appear neutral, I knew he wasn't okay with how things had become. But what was he supposed to do? Claire had made her stance clear, and I could see that he was inching closer to the impossible decision that would tear our family apart. The truth was that I had become a silent observer of my own life. I had no real say in what was happening. I could only watch as Claire's manipulation of the situation pushed my son further away from me, all while he clung to the hope that everything might go back to normal if he just ignored the issue long enough. I had to admit that I was a little angry, though. Angry at Claire for forcing this wedge between us, but also angry at James for not standing up to her, for not even trying to fix things. I had always tried to be supportive, never wanting to get in the way. But Claire's ultimatum was the final straw. It felt like a cruel game, and I was the pawn. A week after that uncomfortable dinner conversation, the air between us had thickened to a point where I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I had avoided confronting Claire, thinking perhaps that time would smooth things over, but it only made things worse. Claire, in her stubbornness, had set her mind on one thing: if I didn't leave, she would. It was a Wednesday when it all came to a head. James was sitting at the kitchen table, going through some papers, trying to focus on work. Claire entered the room, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. She had been acting strangely all day, her eyes were hard, her lips tight, as if she were preparing for something big. "James," she said, her voice cold and commanding. "We need to talk." I could feel the shift in the room as soon as the words left her mouth. I had been sitting in the living room, pretending to watch television, but I knew what was coming. There was no mistaking that tone. It was the same tone she used whenever she was about to deliver an ultimatum. James looked up at her, his face tired. "About what, Claire?" "I can't do this anymore," she said, her arms crossed defensively. "I can't live in a house where your father is constantly in the way, hovering over everything. It's driving me crazy. I want you to make a decision, James. I won't stay in this house with him anymore." I watched as James' face faltered. His eyes darted from Claire to me, and then back to her. I could see the weight of the decision pressing down on him. It was clear that he was at a breaking point, and the frustration in his face was hard to miss. "Claire," he said, his voice low, "this is my father. I can't just ask him to leave. He's been living here for years. He's not a burden." She wasn't having it. "You don't get it, do you?" Claire shot back, her voice rising. "I'm not asking for a lot, James. All I'm asking is for you to choose. Either your father stays, or I do. This is the last time I'm going to ask you." James' face flushed, his hands tightening around the papers in front of him. I could see the battle raging inside of him. On one side was his wife, the woman he had married, the mother of his children. On the other side was me, his father, the man who had raised him, supported him, and who had given everything for his family. "I can't choose between you two," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose either of you." "I didn't ask for that," Claire snapped. "I gave you an option, James. You can either choose me, or you can choose him. But you can't have both." I sat there, my stomach in knots, feeling as though I were about to suffocate in the silence. Claire's ultimatum had been set in stone. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to relent, not for anything. I stood up then, my legs shaky, my heart heavy with regret. "Claire," I said, my voice more measured than I felt, "I never wanted to be in the way. I never asked for any of this. But this is my home too. I raised James, I supported him, and I've been a part of this family for longer than you've been. I deserve to have a place here. And if that's something you can't accept, then maybe it's time for you to leave." Her eyes narrowed. "What did you just say?" I said, "Maybe it's time for you to leave," I repeated, my voice steady despite the anger simmering inside me. "I don't think you're the one who gets to make that decision. It's his choice, not yours." Claire was taken aback, but only for a moment. She quickly regained her composure, her face hardening once again. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "If you want it that way, then maybe I will leave. But don't expect me to just stay in a house with your father, not after everything he's done." I felt the sting of her words, but I refused to let it show. She had made her choice. And I had made mine. Claire turned and stormed out of the room, leaving James and me in a thick silence. I didn't look at him, not yet. I knew he was struggling, torn between two people he loved. But it wasn't just his decision to make. He had to choose. And the consequences of that choice would determine everything. The day after Claire's ultimatum, everything felt different. The air was thick with tension. I could almost taste it. I had expected things to escalate, but I didn't expect the emotional toll it would take on James. It was clear he was struggling, but I couldn't sit back any longer. I had made my stance clear, and now it was his turn to decide. He had to make a choice between his wife and his father. James and I hadn't spoken much since Claire stormed out of the kitchen. He'd retreated to his study, as he always did when he was upset. I had hoped for a moment of clarity, perhaps a sign that things could somehow settle, but the house felt colder than ever. Claire had disappeared into her own world, locking herself in the bedroom. The house had never felt so empty, even with two people under the same roof. I spent most of the day sitting in my usual chair by the fireplace, trying to distract myself with the television. But it was no use. I couldn't focus on anything. Every crackle from the fire, every sound from the other room, reminded me of the fracture in my family. I had no idea how it had gotten this bad. The evening brought no relief. As usual, James came home late, though this time there was a different air about him. He seemed restless, his eyes darting around as he entered the house. It was like he couldn't find peace, no matter how hard he tried. I sat in the living room, the dim light casting long shadows across the floor. He walked past me, heading straight to the kitchen without acknowledging me. I didn't push him, I knew he needed space. But after everything, I couldn't wait any longer. "James," I called out softly, my voice cutting through the thick silence of the house. He froze in his tracks. For a moment, I thought he might ignore me. But then, he turned around slowly, his face pale and worn from the weight of the situation. I saw it in his eyes, the pain, the confusion, the guilt. He was torn, and I didn't blame him for it. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice more measured than I felt. "It's time we talked about all of this." James took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "I guess it's inevitable, isn't it?" he said quietly, almost to himself. I could see the defeat in his posture, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. But I couldn't hold back anymore. "James," I began, my voice firm but not angry, "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to cause any problems. I've been here, in your home, trying to be a part of the family. But Claire's ultimatum, that's not something I can just ignore." He nodded again, his eyes downcast. "I know, Dad. I know you didn't ask for this. And I know I've been avoiding it. But I don't know what to do. I can't make this choice. I don't want to lose Claire. But I can't lose you either. I can't imagine my life without you in it. But..." His voice trailed off, and I could see the unspeakable tension in his eyes. The truth was there, hanging between us. He didn't know what to say because, deep down, I knew he was already leaning towards Claire's side. "I'm not asking you to choose between us," I said, my voice softer now, as I stood up from the chair. "But you can't keep avoiding this. You have to decide. And whatever you decide, you have to understand that things won't be the same. There's no going back after this." James looked up at me, his eyes red from the weight of it all. "But I don't want things to change. I don't want you to leave, but I also don't want Claire to leave. I'm stuck, Dad. I'm stuck between two people I love." The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. I had always known that my son was sensitive, someone who took the weight of the world on his shoulders, but this was different. He wasn't just feeling the pressure of his wife's ultimatum, he was feeling the crushing weight of a family on the verge of falling apart. I stepped closer to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. James, no matter what happens, I want you to know one thing: I've always wanted the best for you. I've always supported you and tried to be there for you. But you have to stop letting Claire control this. She's making it all about her. This isn't about me being a burden. This is about her making a choice to drive a wedge between us. James's eyes flickered, and I saw the conflict in them. I don't know what's right anymore, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just want peace. I want everything to go back to how it was. But I don't think that's possible anymore, is it? I shook my head slowly. No, son. It's not possible. Not anymore. He let out a long breath, his eyes brimming with tears. I don't want to hurt anyone, Dad. But I don't think I can keep doing this. I don't think I can keep trying to make both of you happy when I'm falling apart inside. I could feel my heart breaking for him. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. I had always imagined a different future, a future where we would all be happy, where our family was whole. But I could see now that the road we were on led to a place I didn't want to go. I never wanted to put you in this position, I said softly, my hand still on his shoulder. But I can't change the past. I can't undo what's happened. All I can do now is tell you that no matter what, I'm your father. I will always be here for you, but you have to make this decision for yourself. You can't keep avoiding it. James swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I know. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to make it right. Making it right doesn't mean pleasing everyone, I said, my voice firm but compassionate. Making it right means being true to yourself. You can't keep living like this, James. You can't keep trying to fix something that's beyond repair. It's time to face the truth. He stared at the floor, his hands clenched in his lap. I don't know if I can do that. You have to, I said. Because if you don't, you'll lose more than just me. You'll lose yourself. James didn't answer. Instead, he stood up from the table, walked to the window, and stared out into the night. I knew the decision was coming. I didn't know when, but I knew he would eventually have to face the truth. The following days passed in a blur of silence. James and Claire no longer even exchanged casual pleasantries. Their once warm home had turned into a battlefield, and I was caught in the middle. Claire, though quiet, carried her coldness like a weapon. She wasn't speaking to me, but her presence in the house made it clear, she was ready for the end. The tension hung heavy in the air, thick with the unsaid words and unresolved conflict. I spent most of my time alone, trying to keep my distance. I felt like a ghost in my own house, watching my family crumble, unable to stop it. There were moments when I wanted to confront Claire again, to tell her how much damage she was doing, but every time I opened my mouth, the words got caught in my throat. It was as if saying anything would make it worse. I couldn't afford to make this worse. James, on the other hand, seemed to retreat further into himself. He would come home from work, go straight to his study, and lock the door behind him. He never spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged with the weight of the impossible choice before him. He loved Claire, but I could feel him pulling away from her, too. He didn't know how to make the right decision, and it was eating him up from the inside. One evening, after another long day of silence, I found myself sitting by the window, staring out into the night. The wind was picking up, rattling the windows. It was cold, but I didn't feel it. The house felt like a prison, and I was its most reluctant occupant. I could hear the faint sounds of Claire moving around upstairs, probably getting ready for bed. It was the first time in a long while that I hadn't heard her pacing or snapping at James. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. But I knew better. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. James came downstairs a few hours later, his face drawn with exhaustion. I could see the toll this was taking on him. He stood at the foot of the stairs for a moment, just looking at me. I didn't say anything, didn't ask him what was going on. I didn't want to push him any further. He finally spoke. "Dad, can we talk?" I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something in his voice, something urgent, almost desperate. "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" He walked over to the couch and sat down, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," he said, his voice strained. "I feel like I'm suffocating. It's like I'm trapped in a vice, and I can't breathe. I'm losing both of you, and I don't know how to fix it. Every time I try to do the right thing, it feels like I'm just making it worse." I sat beside him, unsure of what to say. I could see the weight of it all in his eyes. He was torn, and the pressure was cracking him. I had been in his position before, torn between two people I loved, unable to choose. But this was different. This wasn't just about balancing two sides. This was about survival, about the breaking point. "I never wanted to put you in this position," I said softly. "But you can't keep living like this. You need to make a decision, James. I know it's not easy, but you have to choose." He shook his head. "You don't understand. It's not that simple. If I choose you, Claire will leave, and I can't lose her. If I choose her, I'll lose you. I don't know if I can live with either of those outcomes." I let out a long breath, trying to find the right words. "James, you're not choosing between us. This isn't about Claire or me. It's about you. It's about your peace of mind, your happiness. You're so focused on trying to make us both happy that you're forgetting about yourself." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for answers. "But I don't know who I am without both of you. I don't know how to be happy when I feel like I'm failing everyone." "You're not failing anyone," I said firmly. "You're trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect son, and it's killing you. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be true to yourself." He stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "I don't know what that even means anymore. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I could make it work, but it's all falling apart." I stood, my own frustration rising. Sometimes, doing the right thing means making the hard choice. You can't keep avoiding it, James. You have to decide what kind of life you want. A life where you're constantly trying to appease others, or a life where you can finally breathe again. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his face a mixture of fear and uncertainty. "I don't know if I can live with either option," he whispered. "You will," I said, my voice steady. "You'll find a way. But you can't keep living in limbo. You have to make a decision, for yourself. Not for me. Not for Claire. For you." James sat back down, his head in his hands. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was suffocating, the weight of his indecision hanging over us both. I didn't know how this would end, but I knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same. I could see it in his eyes. James was spiraling. The guilt had reached a breaking point, and his indecision was starting to eat him alive. For days, he had bounced between the two of us, torn between his love for Claire and his loyalty to me, but the cracks in his composure were becoming impossible to ignore. I had hoped, for his sake, that he would find a way through the fog of his own turmoil, but deep down, I knew the moment was coming when he would have to face the truth of what his inaction had cost. Claire, meanwhile, was not giving up. She never did. Her coldness had deepened in the past week. I had caught her on several occasions, sneaking around the house, preparing something big. I hadn't been able to piece it together, but the subtle hints were there: the way she moved when she thought no one was looking, the quiet, calculating expressions on her face whenever she glanced at James. I could sense the storm building inside her. James had become a shell of himself. There was no more talking, no more sharing of thoughts. He wasn't coming to me with his doubts or seeking my advice anymore. It was as if his silence had become a fortress, a way to protect himself from the inevitable. But in doing so, he was only pushing us further apart. One late evening, as the house settled into its usual eerie quiet, I found myself once again sitting alone in the living room, staring into the dying embers of the fire. The warmth was comforting, but the loneliness was consuming. I had been here for years, a constant in James's life, and now it felt as if I was nothing more than an afterthought. The front door opened, and the soft sounds of footsteps echoed through the hallway. I didn't need to look up to know it was James. The weight of his presence was enough to make my heart ache. He stood in the doorway for a moment, hesitant, like he was trying to summon the courage to speak. But the words never came. He walked over to the armchair across from me and sat down slowly. For the first time in days, he looked me in the eyes. There was no longer any trace of the boy I raised, the young man who had once looked up to me with admiration and trust. Now, all I saw was a man who had been swallowed whole by his own guilt. "I can't do it anymore, Dad," he said quietly, his voice cracking as the words tumbled out. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. It's not." I could hear the pain in his voice, the rawness of his emotion. My heart went out to him, but I couldn't ignore the bitterness that had settled in my chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had always imagined a different future for us, one where we could sit down and laugh together, one where he could make decisions without feeling like he was being torn apart. "Then do something about it, James," I said, my voice firm but filled with the weight of the years I had spent waiting for him to make a choice. "You can't keep pretending. You can't keep letting this happen. Not like this." He sighed, rubbing his face as if trying to push away the thoughts racing in his mind. "I don't know what to do, Dad. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could find a way to make everyone happy, but now I'm just lost." I could see him spiraling, the inner turmoil tearing at him. I had seen this before, the way he used to struggle with big decisions, the way he would second-guess himself. But this time, it was different. This time, the stakes were too high. It wasn't just a job or a choice of college anymore. This was his family, his home, his happiness. And somewhere along the way, he had lost it all. "I never wanted to cause this much trouble," James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But now, everything feels like it's slipping away." "I know, son," I said, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "I know it's hard. I never wanted this for you, either. But you can't keep living like this, trying to appease everyone. You need to make a decision." He looked at me, his eyes brimming with tears. "I don't want to lose her, Dad. I don't want to lose my life with Claire. But I can't just abandon you, either. You've been here for me my whole life. You've always been there." My chest tightened at his words. "James, you don't have to lose me to keep your marriage. But you can't keep being torn between the two of us. It's destroying you. You need to take a step back and figure out what you really want, not just what everyone else expects." He looked away then, his gaze falling to the floor. It was as if he couldn't bear to hear the truth I was offering. But deep down, I knew he needed it. He needed to hear it from someone who wasn't going to sugarcoat things, someone who had already lived through the pain of making hard choices. And then, in the silence that followed, the door to the kitchen opened with a creak. I turned, and there she was. Claire. Standing in the doorway, her face a mask of coldness. She had been listening. "James," she said, her voice dripping with icy calm, "we need to talk. I've given you enough time to make up your mind. I can't keep doing this. If you're not going to choose me, then I'm leaving." Her words hit James like a slap. His face drained of color, and for a moment, I could see the devastation in his eyes. The choice was finally before him. Claire wasn't going to wait forever. She had made that clear long ago. I could see James opening his mouth to say something, but no words came. He stood up and took a few unsteady steps toward her, his hand outstretched as if to stop her. But Claire wasn't looking back. She was already halfway out of the room, her back turned as she walked toward the stairs. "I can't keep living like this, James," she called back, her voice sharp. "Make your choice. But know this, if you choose him, I'm gone." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, I thought James might collapse under the weight of it all. He had no idea what to do. His life had been turned upside down by this ultimatum, and Claire wasn't giving him any room to breathe. I stood up, watching the exchange between them. It was clear now that this was the end. Whatever choice James made, it would change everything. The only question left was which one would he choose. The house felt like a pressure cooker, the tension nearly unbearable. I could feel it in the air, like static before a storm. Claire's ultimatum had been delivered, and it was clear she wasn't going to back down. She had made her choice, either him or me. It was as simple as that. But I could see it in James's eyes. He was broken, caught between the two people he loved most in the world. I had spent my life supporting him, guiding him, and trying to help him become the man he was meant to be. But now, all my good intentions felt like they had led us to this moment of destruction. Claire wasn't going to change her mind, and James was running out of time. I had hoped, somewhere deep down, that maybe this could all be resolved without any permanent damage. Maybe James could find a way to balance his loyalty to both of us, find a middle ground. But that hope was fading quickly. I could feel the inevitability of the choice settling in, heavy and suffocating. There would be no easy way out of this. The hours passed in agonizing silence. I stayed in my chair by the fire, as I had done for days now, hoping for something to shift. But all I saw was James pacing back and forth, his face drawn and exhausted. He hadn't eaten much, hadn't said much either. He was drowning in the weight of his indecision, and I could see how it was consuming him. I had tried to offer him advice, tried to push him toward the truth, but now it was too late. His decision had to come from him. There was no one else who could make it for him. And as painful as it was for me to admit, I couldn't force him to choose me. I couldn't control what he felt for Claire, no matter how much I wanted to. It was past midnight when James finally came into the living room. He didn't speak at first, just stood there for a moment, as if trying to summon the courage to face what was coming. His hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep and the constant internal battle he had been waging. "I've made my decision," he said, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. I sat up straighter in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment I had been dreading had arrived. James looked at me, his gaze filled with sorrow. "I don't want to lose you, Dad. I don't. But Claire, she's my wife. I love her. And I can't lose her." I felt the words hit me like a punch. It wasn't a surprise. Deep down, I knew this was the path he would choose. He had always been a family man, someone who valued loyalty and commitment above all else. But hearing the words from his mouth, seeing the pain in his eyes, made it real. It was happening. The choice had been made. "I know, son," I said quietly, my voice steady but my heart breaking. "I understand." James's eyes filled with tears, and he looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. But I can't go back. I have to live my life with her. I have to make it work." The words stung, but I couldn't blame him. I had seen the way Claire held him captive in her grip, the way she controlled the narrative of their life together. She had always known how to play her cards, and she had finally won. It was hard to admit, but it was true. "James," I said, my voice softer now, "you don't owe me an apology. You've made your choice, and I respect that. I'm not angry with you. I'm proud of the man you've become. And I hope that, one day, you'll understand that I only want the best for you." He nodded, his shoulders shaking as he tried to hold back his tears. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself for this. I don't want to lose you. I don't." "I'm not going anywhere, James," I replied. "I'll always be here for you. But you need to do what's best for your future now. And that means making a life with Claire, no matter what it costs. I can't live your life for you. But I can stand by you while you live it." James broke down then, his body racked with sobs. It was the release he had needed, the release he had been holding back for so long. I didn't move, didn't reach out to comfort him. Instead, I let him cry. He needed to mourn this loss, this inevitable fracture that had come between us. After a long while, James finally wiped his eyes and stood up. "I'll talk to her," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll make things right with her. I have to." I nodded, watching him as he walked out of the room, his shoulders heavy with the burden of his choice. The sound of his footsteps faded as he ascended the stairs to their room, and I sat back in my chair, exhausted. The choice had been made. I knew it, and he knew it, too. The consequences of his decision would ripple through the rest of our lives, and there was no turning back. For a moment, I let the silence settle around me. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, trying to reconcile the reality of the situation. I had done everything I could for James. I had been there for him, guided him, and loved him through every challenge. But I couldn't keep him from his own path. I couldn't hold him back anymore. I heard the door open upstairs, and then the unmistakable sound of Claire's voice, cold and demanding. "You've made your decision, then?" she asked. James didn't answer immediately, and I knew that the final confrontation was about to take place. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be pretty. But it was the only way forward. The fallout from James's choice was inevitable. The consequences of his decision began to unfold, and in the end, the truth about the cost of loyalty, and manipulation, became clear. The next morning was one of those rare, heavy silences. I didn't hear Claire's voice coming from upstairs, nor did I hear the usual bustle of breakfast being prepared. For the first time in days, the house felt still, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for the fallout from James's decision. I sat in the same chair by the window, unable to pull myself away from the place I had been for so many years. The warmth of the sun streaming through the window was no comfort. The tension had settled over everything like a thick fog. The door to the kitchen opened, and James walked in. His eyes were red, his face drawn with exhaustion. He hadn't slept much, I could tell. He sat down across from me, the weight of his decision pressing down on him in ways that words couldn't express. He didn't need to say anything. I could see it in the slump of his shoulders, the way he avoided looking me in the eye. He was lost. "Dad," he began, his voice low and strained. I tried to talk to her. I did everything I could to make things right. But..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. His hands were trembling as he clasped them together, as though he was trying to hold himself together. I waited, letting him find the words he needed. "I don't know how to fix this," he said finally, his voice breaking. "She's not the same. She's changed, Dad. I thought I could fix things, I thought I could make her happy, but she's not the woman I married anymore. And now I'm stuck with the mess I've made." His admission hit me hard. I knew, deep down, that Claire was never going to change. She had always been manipulative, controlling, and unwilling to compromise. She wanted what she wanted, and she would stop at nothing to get it. But hearing James admit it, that was a different story. He had finally seen the truth. And now, he was facing the consequences of his blind loyalty. I didn't respond right away. I let him sit in his guilt and confusion. He needed to feel this. He needed to understand the price of the choice he had made. And he wasn't alone. I was here, but I couldn't be his savior. Not anymore. James, I said finally, my voice calm but filled with the weight of years of fatherly love and disappointment, you've spent so much of your life trying to make others happy. You've bent yourself in ways you shouldn't have, and now you're paying the price for it. But you're not alone in this. You can't keep living like this. You have to make a choice for yourself, not for her. Not for me. For you. He looked up at me then, his face a mix of guilt and confusion. I don't know who I am without her, Dad, he whispered. I thought she was everything I needed. But now, I'm not so sure. You're still you, James, I said quietly. You're still my son. And no one can take that away from you. Not her. Not anyone. There was a long pause as he processed my words. He seemed to be struggling, as if trying to reconcile the man he had been with the man he needed to become. The man who could make his own decisions, free from the toxic hold Claire had on him. Finally, James stood up, wiping his eyes. He didn't say anything else. There was no grand resolution. There was no easy fix. But I could see the clarity starting to form in his eyes. He had begun to see what had been happening all along, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't blinded by love or guilt. As he left the room, I sat there, feeling the weight of the years that had led to this point. My heart ached for my son, but I knew this was the only way he could truly grow. He had to face the consequences of his own choices. And I couldn't shield him from that anymore. It wasn't long before Claire came downstairs. She didn't speak to me. She never did. Instead, she went straight to the kitchen, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with a sharp, decisive rhythm. I knew she was going to make her move, and I wasn't about to get in her way. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen for a moment, just staring at me, her eyes filled with a cold fury. It was the same look she had always given me whenever she was about to take control of the situation. You've made your choice, then, she said, her voice icy and calculating. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. She already knew the answer. I don't know what you mean, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the anger brewing inside me. I'm not the one who's made a choice. That's James's decision to make. Claire's lips twisted into a smile, but it wasn't a pleasant one. You think this is over? You think I'm just going to walk away because you want me to? You're wrong, Robert. I've spent years building this life, and I'm not going to let you ruin it. I didn't say anything. I knew better. Claire wasn't going to listen to reason. She had never cared for anyone but herself, and now she was showing her true colors. The silence between us stretched, thick with the tension that had been building for so long. And then, as if she had decided she had nothing left to prove, she turned and walked out of the room without another word. The following days were a blur. James, in his newfound clarity, began the painful process of untangling himself from Claire's web. He had seen the truth, but the damage had already been done. Their marriage was over. And though it hurt him deeply, he was beginning to understand that this was the only way forward. I watched as he began to rebuild. Slowly, but surely, he was starting to regain control of his life. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. But it was necessary. For the first time in a long time, James was choosing himself. And I, for my part, was here. Always. Waiting. Watching. Ready to support him, no matter where his journey took him. Author's note. This story explores the difficult, often painful journey of realizing that we cannot always make the people we love happy, no matter how hard we try. James's choice represents a painful but necessary step toward reclaiming his autonomy, breaking free from the manipulation of someone who was never going to give him the love and respect he deserved. Sometimes, the hardest part of a relationship is learning when to let go. Through James's eventual realization, we see the importance of making choices that prioritize self-respect and emotional health, even when it means losing what we thought we wanted most.